Guys, tell you what we're going to do. I butchered that. We're going to get to the 3-minute and 30-second mark, and then I want you to pause it there, and I will again count it down, and we will unsync at the 3:30 mark. Okay, I apologize for that. Let me catch up on what just happened. As you're watching it right now, Sky basically, he tried to be really aggressive in his creeping, and you know, like I was getting ready to say, when your opponent goes Beastmaster, you can probably know that he's not going to be harassing you right away. He's probably going to go creep. You don't typically see somebody harass with a Beastmaster. Not that it can't be done, but that's just not typical. So the Demon Hunter is, I think, probably the best harassing unit in the game. I mean, you could argue for the Death Knight probably, but the Demon Hunter really is just a thorn in the side of the human players, because your creeping and everything that you want to do early in the game is really dependent upon those water elementals to tank for you, and of course a Demon Hunter that has mana burn is going to wreak havoc with that whole deal. And it also does a lot of damage. I mean, that Demon Hunter is capable of coming in and taking out one of your units if you're not careful, and Sky got pretty, well, I would say maybe a little bit too confident or too aggressive in his creeping. He called some militia, and he tries to creep out this little Knoll camp here, and he wants to get that Knoll Overseer. It doesn't work out so great for him, so he ends up, his militia end up getting beat up a little bit. He has some footmen that take a little bit of damage as well, and so things really don't go so good for him in the early game here. So by now you're at 3:30. It's 3 minutes 30 seconds, 1x speed, and I apologize for that little snafu there, guys. And let's unpause in 3, 2, 1, unpause. So anyways, you see here, he's still, determined to try and get that Overseer and finish this creep camp and maybe do some damage to that Demon Hunter. Basically, the Demon Hunter is able to get that experience from that Knoll Overseer, so he hits level 2, and now the human has not hit level 2 because his creeping has been disrupted. Not only that, but he is down to some units that are kind of dinged up now. And, none of these things are good things. So, definitely a pretty major disadvantage at this point for the human. It hasn't got off to a great start for him. So, at this point, now the Night Elf player is going to come right back. He's got 5 archers here, and he's able to come out here, and it's 3 footmen versus 5 archers, and the Arch-Mage is low on mana, so you don't have the water elemental support. It's really just not a good situation for the human player at this point. I mean, you can see how these little things really can turn the tide in this early game, and of course, once the early game gets decided in this fashion, well, I mean, like I said earlier, that is going to limit what you're able to do later in the game as far as trying to push. So he's going to lose this footman that he's trying to retreat, and he's done everything basically the same as he did in the previous game. He's hitting tier 2 nice and early relative to what you would typically see, and he's going to come back up here. He's going to try and get his Naga, but guess what? This time, he doesn't get to the Naga first. He gets there a little bit late. And as a result, 1 footman down, and now the advantage, the tables have turned even more in the favor of the Night Elf. So he calls militia, and he thinks, I need to really do something drastic here to try and get back in this game, because he knows this thing is slipping away from him. It's early, but he's got to make something happen here if he wants to get back in this game. He's able to put some pressure on that Naga, but not enough. And he's now got his own Naga in some serious trouble. So even with the militia, the militia enabled him probably to get that Naga kill. If he hadn't called militia, it probably would have gone even worse. But it really still doesn't go all that great for him. He loses several of those militia. He ends up losing his Naga, and he's, again, I mean, these footmen are like hanging on by a thread, and he's not going to get any of these archers here. So the Night Elf player is leveling a little faster than he is. Their primary heroes are probably about the same right now. They're both 2 3/4, let's say. Oh no, I take it back. The Arch-Mage is just barely over 2, so the Demon Hunter is well ahead of the Arch-Mage, and is going to hit level 3 here pretty quickly, whereas the Arch-Mage, not so much. He's got to go back. He's sitting in his base. He's got to heal up. And you can see he's on the defensive. Clearly, he is now on the defensive. And so he revives his Naga, and he's healed up a little bit, so now he's going to head back out. He's at 31 food, whereas his opponent is only at 28, and yet the opponent is well on his way now to tier 3. And yeah, he's about 1/3 of the way. So the advantage really isn't there for the human player. And, he's going to be determined about trying to keep the pressure on. So he comes up here, and he wants to try and put some pressure on the Night Elf. Excuse me one second. He wants to try and hit him before those lures get up, but this is a base that's been pretty well constructed. He's going to have to go up past that Ancient of War, and he's going to take damage if he does that. So, pretty good job here by the Night Elf. He's able to keep him fighting uphill, which is obviously something you don't want to do. And the Night Elf is doing, significantly more damage. You can see the focus fire there on the Demon Hunter for a long time. It really doesn't pay off very well. And again, here come the militia. And the militia are going to help. He forces the Demon Hunter to TP, but the DH hits level 3. He's now back in his base. He's going to be able to heal up from his wells a little bit. And we are on our way to bears. So this thing is going to be kind of increasingly slipping away from the human player. Again, pretty much the same strategy as the last game, but you could see the early game didn't go so well. Having that Demon Hunter, coupled with the fact that Sky probably got a little bit too aggressive with his creeping, caused the early game not to go quite as well for him this time, and as a result, this tier 2 push, it didn't have the power that he needed to really make it work. So now he's got to back off, and, well, you're going to see how this thing unfolds, but basically, the advantage now goes to the Night Elf, because Sky's got basically just that single sanctum. He's going to create a few riflemen as well, but he's got kind of locked in at this point to going with that single sanctum approach. Here at this point, he probably is struggling with the resource end a little bit, because as you can see, he's lost several militia over the course of those 2 battles. The first one at the tavern, and then when he brought militia to his opponent's base. So at this point, the Night Elf, he's at 44 food, while Sky is at 41. Not a huge advantage, but he also has a tech advantage, and he also has a level advantage on his heroes, which are 3 and 2, with the Demon Hunter almost halfway to 4. And the Arch-Mage is at 2, and the Sky's Naga is also at 2. So here we go. You've got that mixture of some focus fire ability from the rifles and from the sorceress, a little bit as well from the spellbreakers, but not enough. He loses his Arch-Mage, and he's going to lose a few more units here before it's all said and done. Again, calling militia. Not a bad thing ordinarily, good idea, but he's going to pay a pretty dear price for this in terms of resources. He keeps losing all of these wood peasants as he continually calls militia, and that's going to slow down his unit production as well. So over time, this game continues to slip away, slip away, slip away. So what can he do to turn this thing around? Against a player as good as Phoenix, probably not too much. I think he's playing this one out, hoping that Phoenix makes some kind of a big mistake and lets him get back in this game. But there's, like I said, when you have 2 people that are fairly evenly matched, when there's some kind of a significant advantage that is gained, it's really hard to undo that. So when you're playing on Battle.net, you don't necessarily always know, how good is my opponent. I mean, you can judge a little bit based on watching their micro relative to yours. Are they just saving units left and right, whereas you're not, or is it the other way around? You may be able to judge a little bit whether or not you're a better player than they are. But at this level that we're watching here, You know, these guys are all just extremely good. And so I think Sky probably knows, you know, even if I really outplay this guy from here forward, I've given up too much at this point, and I'm probably not going to win. But obviously, he's not just going to give up. He's going to make every effort here to make a comeback. So I don't know what he could have really done differently here. You know, I don't know if maybe he could have tried to go for tier 3 or something. Again, I think the fact that he kept losing those militia, excuse me, probably prevented him from having the resources to do that. At this stage of the game, he's only got 2 peasants on wood, and you know he's pretty much low on gold and wood. And you know, you look at the population counts, 45 to 53. That 8 food advantage doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're also comparing really, you know, tier 3 units to tier 2 units, then the food advantage plus the tech advantage, that's a pretty significant difference. So, you know, you're going to see this battle here. You know, the human player just, there's not a ton he can do. Every time he tries to focus down one of these bears, you know, here comes the Staff of Sanctuary to the Staff of Preservation to take good care of those bears and send them back home. And there's just, you know, maybe he gets a kill here and there, but he's not going to be able to do enough damage to really make any headway, to really reverse the fact that he is now trailing in this game significantly. So, again, I think once you realize, you have to make the decision probably before you even hit tier 2. Excuse me 1 second.
A player's forces are under attack.
A little drink there before I lose my voice. If things go well early in the game, or even if it's fairly neutral, I still think you can pull off that tier 2 push. If things don't go so good for you, and you have not been able to be the aggressor, you've been having to play a defensive game, you got to think in terms of, how do I change things up? How do I throw my opponent a curveball? What do I have to do differently to get into this game and gain the upper hand? You know, I guess there's a couple of different things you could do, really, if you're in that situation. You pretty much either want to expand, or you want to tech to tier 3, or you want to do something where maybe you try and really surprise your opponent. Again, at the level of play that Sky and Phoenix play at, you're probably never really going to surprise your opponent too terribly much, because they do such an excellent job of scouting. But in your average ladder match, things don't go so well for you early on. You know, one thought might be, well, maybe I'll put a couple towers on my base to buy me some time, tech to tier 3, and, you know, do something a little unusual in terms of, well, I'm going to mass up knights, or, you know, I'll even, you know, go for some griffins here and see if I can really take him by surprise. Maybe he'll have all bears and he won't be ready with the dryads, you know, who knows. But you have to do something to get back in the game when you've put yourself at a disadvantage early on. And, you know, Sky just was never really able to do that here. You can see the game is kind of slipping away from him further and further. He's been able to catch back up a little bit on food count. He's only down by 3 in terms of total food count. However, you know, he's going to call all his here. I mean, he has got his entire food count more or less at his disposal here, and he's going to chase the Night Elf back. And watch what Phoenix does here. I mean, he does a nice job here. He just keeps pulling his units back, pulling back, until he kind of gets to a place where he feels like, okay, now I got my bears in the front, I got archers and dryads in the back, I got my heroes in pretty good position, now's where I make my stand. And he knows that the timer on those militia has also worn down a little bit, and so he figures now's the time to fight. And really, you know, with a couple of healing scrolls and so forth, good use of an invulnerability potion, etc., Staff of Silence, this guy does a great job here, in my opinion. He fights this thing out really well, and he is able to kind of stay in this for a pretty long time when you consider the advantage that Phoenix has had this whole time. He makes this game interesting. He makes this fight pretty interesting, but you know, he even forces a TP here, and that's going to prolong the game for a couple more minutes. He's going to get this bear. Every little bit helps.